Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Tales of the Jedi. I'm going to be doing this as just all 6 episodes together. Unfortunately, it's only 6 episodes because every single one was absolutely amazing. I really loved it. I was surprised that it ended up being the way that it was because, I didn't really look too much into it. I kind of don't want to know too much stuff. Story-wise, I try to kind of stay far away from things. And I knew it was Tales of the Jedi. I knew it was like, all right, here's some stuff with Ahsoka. Here's, baby Ahsoka, which is insanely cute. Baby Ahsoka. And then they had like those little like panda bear dog things. And it was just like the insane level of cuteness in that first episode was ridiculous. But I knew Ahsoka was in it. I knew that we were going to see a young Qui-Gon and Count Dooku. I knew they had this stuff with, I forgot the name of that Inquisitor, but that Inquisitor had like a specific name beforehand where it was like, Clancy Brown is playing this character, and it wasn't just like an Inquisitor. I think they had like a different name for that character. So I knew a little bit of what we were going to be getting. I didn't realize the show was going to be so focused on Dooku and Ahsoka, which I absolutely love. Like, the show is split right down the middle. It is, the first episode is Ahsoka, the last episode is based on Ahsoka, and then I believe the last 2 episodes are based on Ahsoka. So then you have episodes 2, 3, and 4 based on Count Dooku, and I love the way they handled it. So going from the beginning, we're just gonna go beginning to end. Life and Death, that's like the only title I remember. Life and Death. I think one is called Choices and one is called Justice, but Life and Death I specifically remember being the title of the first episode. So we start off with Ahsoka, the birth of Ahsoka and her tribe and everything like that. And I was like, this is really cool. It's just tiny baby Ahsoka, super cute. They put all the baby sounds in. She looks insanely cute. Like I said, little puppy dog bear deals. It just a lot of cuteness. And then her mom takes her out on this traditional hunt. Things go simple at first. She shoots what we're just gonna say is a deer, just to keep it simple. And then a golden saber-toothed tiger comes out, and it's like, I was like, okay, here we go. Here's the the craziness of this sequence. And for a second, things obviously Ahsoka was gonna live. I thought it'd be one of those really crazy things where for whatever reason her mom dies, and full Disney mode. Admittedly, if they killed her mom, it would have been a full Disney experience. But I thought that's kind of where things were headed for a second. But her mom ends up being okay. The rest of the village comes out. They kind of get rid of the saber tooth. And as it's running, it's like, all right, let me just go ahead and pick this kid up real gently and just take off into the forest. So they're freaked out. They lose Ahsoka. They're like, we're gonna go get her back. She's of course in this death pit. There's just stuff all over the place in the cave. And the saber tooth is just kind of looking at her, and it's like, okay, I think it's time to eat. And it's growling and stuff and slowly walking up to her. And I'm pretty sure they put a little bit of saliva in the mouth and everything. It was ready to just chomp and kill this little baby. And then of course she does the classic Jedi move. This thing's coming up at her and she's just like, boop, right on the nose. And it's just a full Jedi stare down. And the thing just, it's calm. And then it just, that connection, that forced connection of just calming down a creature. And she had that touch as a child. And this show, I think, did a lot to really, we've always known, if you obviously follow the shows, a big thing with Ahsoka is that she started off as, obviously just an apprentice, an apprentice that was kind of thrown in and added into the canon of the universe. And then as she develops, it's like, okay, she's one of the most powerful Jedi, within Star Wars history at this point. The things that they've shown her do are astronomical. It's insane. And I think this was another one of those moments. She was at that point, I guess it was a couple months. I was gonna say she was a newborn baby, but at that point it had been a couple of months at least. And she just touches the saber tooth right on the nose, and that's it. And then this thing just rides her in the village. And while I was watching, I was like, this is one of those things where in the canon of that universe, that village will tell that story for generations. Ahsoka, who they obviously eventually did leave off to become a Jedi, they'll talk about her about we had a Jedi here once, and she's left and gone off to do Jedi things. And they'll tell that story of how as a baby she was taken by this creature and then just literally rode it back into the village. The thing just rolled in, put its head down, her mom grabbed her, and then the thing was just like, all right, I'm off. Basically, what, don't F with me again. The kid's cool though. And then it left. And it's that's a story told for generations in that village. And I was like, that's kind of cool. It's it's just a small moment. And it just ends. It's how is this possible? And it's Jedi. Ahsoka is Jedi. And I was like, that is sick. That was a great way to do it. It was very well done. So I loved the first episode. And then episode 2 hit. and that was like the beginning of like a mini arc for Count Dooku, which ends very wild. But it begins like a mini arc for Count Dooku, where it starts off and it was like, oh cool, this is the episode with young Qui-Gon Jinn, who just looks like obviously Liam Neeson, a full-grown man, and they just put his face on a teenager's body. Because I'm like, I know it's supposed to be young him, but it's hard to distinguish it. It was like, it just looks like adult Liam Neeson, and they were just like, just take this face and put it on a body it doesn't really fit on. And that's how I felt personally. Then when they had him, obviously when he was an adult, I was like, that feels a lot better. Because when it was just his face, it felt like they didn't do enough to make it like a younger version of his face. They probably did. That's probably exactly what he looked like. I'm sure they had references and all sorts of stuff they got from him. But it was just like, that just looks like his adult grown man face on a teenager's body. And it felt weird. But I got over that. Young Count Dooku, clean shaven, like he didn't have, the full thing going on. And it was like clean shaven and younger. And he's taking his Padawan out. It's like they're going to find the senator's kid. Turns out the whole village stole the kid, which I thought was a really interesting moment. Where it was like, like she's the kidnapper, and then everybody heard him say that. I knew everybody stands up. And he's like, they all are. And so they find the kid, and then it turns out they were doing that to help the senator, but the senator didn't know that yet. They realized as they were kind of going through, like, the senator is a pretty crappy dude. Like, he just let this place. It looked like, you know what? It's funny. I knew it was something in my head when I was watching it, and I just realized their town looked like the town of Sleepy Hollow. That's what it was from, like the old movie, like which oddly enough, Count Dooku was in. Obviously not Count Dooku, but the actual actor whose name I'm totally drawing a blank on his name right now, which really sucks. But he was actually in that movie. But the town reminded me of Sleepy Hollow. I could not call it when I was watching the episode, but I'm like, something about this looking super run down. Like, it looked really old too. It looked like an old timey town that was also barren. But it reminded me a lot of Sleepy Hollow. That's what it was, because everyone was definitely dressed like in like old garb, and they definitely made it look like an old timey town where it was just almost an abandoned village where everything was obviously terrible. And so they find out like, oh, the senator's been a pretty crappy person. They talk to his son. He realizes how crappy things have been, and the kid's like, I'm disgusted and disappointed in my father that this has gone down this way. And then the senator shows up and is like, like, you betrayed us, Jedi. And it's like, yeah, actually, he didn't know we were here. And then that's a whole conversation, and you're dealing with Count Dooku, and it's like, look, we gotta calm this down in a very different way. And then of course the shootout happens. People start dropping like flies, and then Dooku is just like, okay, the monologue is happening. The villain monologue is like, look, I'm gonna get my son back. I'm gonna like kill all these poor people. There's nothing you can do. And then he starts getting choked up, and it was like, oh, Count Dooku did a full-on force choke on this guy. And then of course he like shoots back Qui-Gon. He's like, Master, no. And he's like, like, shut up, kid. And he pushes him back, and he's just choking this dude, and he's just deflecting with this lightsaber. And I was like, this is a very crazy moment. Also, Count Dooku with a blue lightsaber just looked weird. I was like, this feels almost unnatural to see him with a blue lightsaber. But he's force choking this guy with a blue lightsaber, and he's just deflecting and then like pushing people as he gets like a little moment, and he's just force choking this dude. And Qui-Gon, he's like, you need to go save your dad. And so he lets him out, and of course he runs up and gets in front of Count Dooku, and it's like, please don't kill my dad. And it's like, okay, that's how things calm down. And I was like, that was a cool moment. We saw the dark of Count Dooku, just that first spark, and it went up piece by piece for the next 2 episodes. And I love the way it was handled, and Qui-Gon kind of being praised by Dooku, where it was like, you did the smartest thing that could have been done in order to kind of calm all of this down. And by the end, they see the villagers actually being helped by some of the guards that were actually with the center and stuff like that. So I was like, all right, that was a cool ending, and it was a nice thing. We see young Qui-Gon Jinn. Simple episode. It was fun. The dark of Count Dooku, where it's like, the corruption and darkness that people like you place on, the common folk should really be basically eradicated. I think he says eradicated, like throughout the universe. And so he's definitely on that sort of anti-hero thing where it's like, I want to do good even if I have to do it in harsh ways. And so then we get the next episode, and I was gonna stop watching too, because I was wanted to do something else, and then I saw the thumbnail and I was like, it's Count Dooku and Mace Windu, and I was like, I gotta watch this episode. They both do dark stuff. So watch that episode. They're going into investigating what happened to one of their own. A Jedi was killed. They go to the site, and it was just like, it was obviously weird from the very beginning. Like, even they say it, because the dude was like, okay, well, they asked him like, can we go back to the site of where it happened? And he was like, oh, to relive such a tragedy? I don't know. And I'm like, that was the most unconvincing thing I've ever heard. And then the guards were like, we'll take you. And so that's, that moment right there was kind of what made me less suspicious of the guards. So I think that was a good way to do that. So they're obviously like, something's weird with the guy. Let's be careful, but obviously we need to check this out. So he's telling the story, and it's like, oh yeah, this happened, and then the people came down from the trees and attacked us, and there's blaster fire and stuff. And Dooku's just looking around, touching things. It's like, if your ship was there, and all these people here, you came to meet this informant, and they ambushed you from this direction, it's weird that your ship has no blast marks on it. That's super weird. And a Jedi is so incredibly well trained, to be shot in the back is crazy, unless it's from someone that they trust. And so he was caught in this really tight crosshairs, and he tried. The guy really did try, and he was just like, the guards did it. And he tried to run for them for help, and he just got blasted right in the back. And I was like, that really sucks for him. Like he was already like imprisoned by these guards, and he tried, and it was just like, I don't know what else he could have done. He was freaked out. He felt like he couldn't lie anymore, but I was just like, to rat out the people, and then like they're already explaining to you like, man, a Jedi got shot in the back. Your back is already to them. Like, he was obviously panicked, and unfortunately it got him killed. So he's like, the guards did it, and then he gets killed off. And so they go down, and like Dooku and Windu fighting together was very nice. Like, they're going through, they're just taking people down left and right. Dooku like cuts the tree and pushes it over. Like, it was really cool. And so then it's down to the main guard, and who I assume was his son. At first I didn't think about it, and then when he died, I realized that they kind of look similar, and obviously it was his son. He would be much younger. Just the way it seemed, I was like, oh, I don't think they say it at all, but I didn't realize it until that moment when I looked at them both. I was like, I think that was actually his son that got killed there. And then that was actually from Mace Windu, if I'm not mistaken. Like, he blocked it, and then boom, he put it right through his chest and killed him. And it was like, that was it. And of course, another little hint for Count Dooku, where he's like, we did this because, they don't care about us. They don't listen. And we can't really trust, Jedi, because they're basically the lapdogs of the senators. You're just like extra guards for them. You kind of put out their force and will. You don't really care. You're not really here enough for the people. And Dooku, goes to talk to him in prison. It's like, you're kind of right about the corruption, and how we don't really do as much as we probably should and stuff like that. And the guy's like, I'm surprised to hear that from a Jedi. And it's like, Dooku was trying to tell him. He's like, I'll be trying to tell them all the effing time. They just don't want to listen to me. I'm just dumb Dooku over here. But he did what he did. And then we got into the third episode, and that was definitely the best one. I think of all the episodes, I think that was my favorite episode just in general. I think that, and then Ahsoka's training episode right after, is my second favorite. And that's mostly for the literal connection at the very end of that episode. But this was definitely my favorite one. And it starts off, and it's Count Dooku. Once again, he's older. He had the beard and stuff in the episode 3. And so, we have episode 4 hit, and he's older now. I got the full beard and everything, but it's a little bit gray. You can see he has more of the wrinkles. If you look at the picture side by side of episode 2 and then episode 5, it's really cool to see that transition between the episodes of how he starts to look closer to what he does like in the other Clone Wars series. And I was like, that's actually really cool how they did that. And so the first thing he does, he goes to the library, he deletes Kamino, he has the Master Sifo-Dyas stuff, and I was like, oh, this is like episode 2 stuff. I was like, that's really cool. And so then they have some content come up, and then it turns out, oh, this is actually during episode 1, because it's like, yeah, all the news is that your apprentice ended up fighting a Sith Lord. And it's like, really? And so then, of course, he has the conversation with Qui-Gon, because they do reference that where he's like, I'm going to go talk to the council. You just don't see that because they start, I think during that moment is when they focus on like Anakin and Padme and stuff like that. And so he goes to the council, and he talks to them about a Jedi and all this, and he runs into Count Dooku. And it's like, oh, I guess they didn't listen to you. It's like, not really. And so it was a really good moment. And it's like, oh man, I assume that was the last time they ever saw each other. And that was like the opening of the episode. And then it cut. And so he's standing in front of the tree, and he was talking about Qui-Gon again. And it was like, okay, that's kind of cool. He's, just reminiscing because he just saw him. And then it's like, oh, they're holding the funeral on the planet where he passed away. And I was like, oh no, this is a time skip from the middle of episode 1 to the end of episode 1 where he died. And he was heartbroken because he lost his apprentice. And I was like, this is really cool. That was the final thing. It was Qui-Gon Jinn dying. It's just one of those extra layers where like all these little tiny bits and pieces, like, man, if Ahsoka trusted Maul, she actually could have saved Anakin. if she listened to, or why would she believe him? But if she believed him, they could have saved Anakin, or at least, she wouldn't have let him kill Anakin. But it's like they could have saved Anakin. If this random thing happened, that could have happened. If Qui-Gon didn't die, if the council listened to him, just like Dooku always said, like, you guys never listen to anything. Obviously, at this point, he was already doing the clone stuff, and he was already actually working with Emperor Palpatine. But it was just like, that was kind of the final straw where it was official. Because like, even when he goes up to Palpatine towards the end of the episode, he's like, you've gone too far this time. And then Palpatine's just like, hey, you lost an apprentice, but so did I. And he's doing the classic villain thing and trying to, he knows that he's like still right on the edge. He's like, I just need like one little thing to pull him in my direction 100%. And unfortunately, that was the canonical ending of Yaddle's life that did that. And so I was like, oh snap. Like, as it was going on, I was like, oh, cool, we got to see Yaddle. Big question for like, who knows how long. It's been years where we've been like, what happened to Yaddle? She was even referenced in Jedi Fallen Order. It was like, Master Yaddle. And I was like, what happened to her? Everyone was wondering, like, she wasn't in episode 2. What was the deal? Like, puppetry? Like, what happened to Master Yaddle? And boy, oh boy, did we see what happened. And it was right at the end of episode 1. And she follows Dooku. He takes off. I forgot what he said, but he's like, I'm not going to do that. But also, I didn't know this. I'm sure it's been in comics for like literally 2 decades at this point. I did not know Qui-Gon was born on Coruscant. That was one of the random things I didn't know about him. So that was actually very cool, where they talked about why they always stood at that tree, where it's like he was born in the city and all the metal and everything. And he just always looked at this tree because that was just something he didn't know. You don't see that in a city landscape, which is the entire planet of Coruscant. So I thought that was actually a cool little moment. But he goes off to meet Emperor Palpatine, and it was a really good moment. Like, I like the way it was handled, and it was also kind of sad. I'm like, it's not like I'm super attached to Yaddle or anything. I don't know anybody that really is, but it was interesting to see it because I'm just like, oh crap, this is why she isn't in any of the other Star Wars movies. And I knew that was going to happen, but you're just watching it unfold slowly as Count Dooku is still in this process of like, he's turned, but he hasn't turned to the point where obviously, he has a red lightsaber or has killed a Jedi yet. And they go through the process, they're having their conversation, and Yaddle's just like, that's not about to happen. And she strolled out very confidently for someone who is about to just decide, like, I'm going to take you on, and I'm going to take you on if I have to. Because personally speaking, he's already working with the dude. I would have been like, you know what? Let me process some stuff. Let me maybe not fight 2 people at one time. Even if I think I could convince him, who knows how long he's been doing this? He could be 100% gone. He might be pissed at the guy now, but he could do exactly what he did, which is totally kill her. And he did it by himself. He didn't even need Palpatine to help him out. But I probably would have waited a little bit, hop back on my ship. Hey guys, Dooku did this thing, is stuffed up. We got to stop all this. But it was a messed up moment because during that fight, she's like, I dropped my role on the council. Like, I left because I realized how right you were about us not doing enough or not believing that things could be happening behind the scenes. And I was like, dang, that really sucks, because once again, one of those small moments in Star Wars that could have changed the history of everything. It's like, what if you just trusted her? And it was like, okay, you were on the council and you even quit. We could both team up, take Palpatine down, and that would be it. It helped. Like, the crimes that you've done are probably bad. People have definitely been hurt. And she switched her tone at the end when she knew she was dying. Because at first it was like, people have been hurt, but if you bring in the main guy responsible, we can roll all that back. It'll be cool. Palpatine's like, nah, B. That was pretty much all he had to do. Is like, no. And he did his normal thing. Like, don't believe that. It's bad. You're a bad guy now. And of course they fight. And it seemed like he crushed her. And then it's like, he was having that hesitation. And then she lifted up the door because she wasn't completely crushed. I don't know how that worked, but she was like in the middle, but whatever. She used the force and she survived for like half a second. And then she falls over. And then that's when she like did a 180 where it was like, all the people that were hurt, it's like, it'll be all forgiven. It can all be forgiven. We work together. We bring him in. And then it was like, you crushed me with that door. F you. You killed a bunch of people. You suck. And it was like, you'll never find order from that. And then he dropped one of the craziest lines where it was just like, well, then let me give you peace, because they talked about having or finding order and peace. And he's like, well, then let me give you peace. And he just right on the neck, and she's dead. And I was like, and that's how Master Yaddle died. She just vanished, and no one knew. and she died because Count Dooku killed her. And that was insane. But an amazing episode, and that officially ended, those 3 episodes were the Count Dooku arc, going from his time of being a teacher to Qui-Gon to having that moment with Windu, and then his final moment before officially just switching, 100% to the dark side. And even then, he was still trying to get Obi-Wan and be like, hey man, if we team up, we can take out all these bad guys officially and do some good. But he was too far gone. He'd done what he'd done, and it was kind of an Ahsoka thing all over again. Like, I can't trust you. You're the bad guy. You've killed people. Very unfortunate. But it was a great episode. Then Ahsoka's episode hit. They love throwing Kanan in. I think that's just a Dave Filoni thing. And I love seeing it because, Ahsoka's doing her training. She's been super cool. And then there's just this kid. And at first I didn't realize it was Kanan until the second shot of him jumping up whoa, she's super cool. And I was like, oh, that's Kanan again. That's Kanan doing his thing. So that was really funny. But I love that episode. And it was just really early on. And it was Anakin not wanting to be a master very much and being annoyed with the way they do the training. And it's I like the way they did that, where it was it makes sense that he'd be upset about that sort of stuff because he's obviously eventually going to the dark side. He's always been more proactive as far as going for a serious fight. And so they do the training of the weapons being set to stun and Ahsoka kind of fighting in a circle. And so they do that. She got knocked out a couple times, and then they do a time skip after she got knocked out, and then they're training on the ship. And it's it took us 5 minutes to do that one. And so she's training again, and then she got hit with a sneak attack where Rex just pulled out his blasters and hit her. And then they do another time skip, and they're walking. And then I'm like, this looks really familiar. And then once they showed their outfits, and specifically Ahsoka's, I was like, no way. And they show them going up to the door to the end moments of the final episode in Clone Wars. And it was I hope all that training was actually worth it. And then they go out and they play the scene from them walking through the door, and it's hold your fire and stuff. And I was like, that was the sweetest connection I've ever seen, just as a random, just throw that in, because it was just a training thing, because it didn't really do what I thought it was going to do between Ahsoka and Anakin, which is, that's how I thought they were going to do that connection. It was going to be focused on them in the super early days of his, kind of more proactive and slightly harsher version of training. And then the way they kind of were cutting through time, and then it jumps to the series finale of Clone Wars. Absolutely love that moment. And then I was like, oh snap, I have to go back and watch the episode, but I was like, I remember her doing that now, where she was doing that the whole time. And they just made that random connection of them training this whole time, and that was her big training. If you can handle that, you can handle anything. And I was like, wow, that was really well done. So I absolutely love that. Also, we got to see her go from 1 lightsaber to 2. I thought that was interesting. I thought they would put that in there, that maybe that's why she ended up going with 2, because she realized that it worked better with her skills, but they didn't actually specifically reference that. But I thought that was a really cool episode. And then of course, the final episode, we got to see her at the end of episode 3. Also, after Clone Wars. It was another crazy moment where I was like, I cannot believe they put her in the funeral, at Padme's funeral. That was so wild. And then of course she talks to Bail Organa. That's when he gets her the communicator, and that's eventually what leads her to becoming Fulcrum. And I thought it was great. It was a fantastic episode. She's trying to live her life. Here comes the random douchebag. Oh, here's a Jedi over here. Everybody dies. I'm so sorry. Classic story. I feel like we've seen that story 1,500 times in Star Wars. Somebody's just this person's a Jedi. Everybody else gets killed off. And they're like, oh my God, the Empire is bad. Do you guys know that? It's yes, we knew that. Yes, we did. Classic story. Classic Star Wars story, honestly. That little piece right after the Empire is so classic, where people are just ratting everybody out, and then it never works. The dude was literally just about to get killed by an Inquisitor, but of course Ahsoka saved him. Super quick fight, reminded me a lot of Rebels. That's all I'll say about that. But there's a specific fight that's very cool but very short, and I was like, that's super cool. That was another moment where I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be a whole thing. I thought she was going to I don't know where her lightsaber was at. I thought she was going to kind of pull a lightsaber out of nowhere. But I think at that point she didn't, because she dropped her lightsaber at the end of Clone Wars. I just was thinking oh, where's her lightsaber at? But she had abandoned it at that point. And so they go through, she's doing a couple dodges. It was super fast. She's like, dodge, 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 whatever, dude. Let me grab this, turn this off, and just flip it around. Boom, you're dead. I was like, that's Ahsoka. This dude was super confident. He had the crazy Raven mask. He was super cool. His jacket wasn't even on. It was just a cool cloak. This dude looked badass. It was he's gone. Pfft, he's nothing. He's nothing to Ahsoka. Fantastic moment. She calls Bail Organa. I guess the last 3 people that are even alive out of the village. And so he's like, are you sure you're ready to actually get back in the fight? And that's when she realized Even he even says like, it's only gotten worse. Are you sure? And she's like, yeah, like it's time to get back into it. And that is when she becomes Fulcrum. And it was a fantastic ending. I love this whole series. I thought it was really, really well done. I would love to see them do more and focus on other characters. I would love that. I love exactly what they did, because more Ahsoka is always great, especially considering the last episode was like almost an epilogue to Clone Wars, because they literally show what happens after her and Rex leave. Like, I thought I would love almost a whole series of just what did they do between, well, now that final episode from Tales of the Jedi leading all the way up to her moment in a different thing. I guess I don't want to spoil stuff. At this point, I try not to spoil anything that happens randomly in other amazing Star Wars things. But as I always say, if you have not watched Star Wars Clone Wars, once again, sorry, I kind of spoiled that, but if you're watching this review, you've seen Clone Wars. But watch Clone Wars, watch Rebels. There's very important stuff in there, 100%. You kind of have to watch it to know some really important details. So important, in fact, that some of those characters were in the live action version of the final movie, or at least their voices were. Like Ahsoka was in there, Kanan was in there. They had everybody coming back for that to do those voice lines. So important things happen in the animated shows. If for whatever reason you watch this one, which is weird, but you never watch anything else, but you should watch all of it. Just saying. I feel like I say that every single time, and it's probably falling on deaf ears, but you should definitely do that. Thanks for checking this out. This was way longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would kind of shoot through, but each episode just had such amazing stuff. I honestly felt like this was one of the best things that has ever been put out for Star Wars. And maybe it's because it was just simple. Like, the stories themselves were simple, but it was so much extra lore, even in these short little chunks. It was like, that's amazing. Like, that's a crazy thing to see. That's an amazing moment to add. Anything that is immediate Order 66 stuff is just like, it's like caviar. I don't actually like caviar. I've never even had it, but it's a rich thing that I just thought of. But it's like caviar for me, where it's just like, that's a big deal. And putting her in Padme's like funeral procession was crazy. I was like, I cannot believe that they did that. They went to Naboo in hiding, and he even says, you couldn't have done anything for either of them. That's just how it went. It's like, this is good. This is a really good thing. So absolutely loved every single moment of every single episode. We'll love to know your thoughts on it. What are your favorite episodes? Like I said, for me, my favorite is definitely the final Dooku episode. And my second favorite is Ahsoka's training. My third favorite would probably be the final episode. And that's just because of, the Clone Wars connection and seeing what happens afterwards and what really got her back into the fight. We see how long, we don't know the exact time span, but we know that she kind of got out of it for a little chunk of time. So I like the way that was done. But as far as just the epic connection at the end of the 5th episode really brought that up. I enjoyed the episode in general because it was just that intense training, but them doing that connection just made it so much more entertaining for me. Like, somehow that connection alone, and just how intense that was, and just knowing the history, of course, having watched all of Clone Wars, something about that just made that final little connection be like, oh wow, that was something that was just an epic moment. And they brought like an insane amount of like context and lore and even extra connection between Ahsoka and the characters. And it's just like, man, that it just elevated something that I still find to be one of the greatest things that's ever been made for Star Wars. So absolutely loved it. Like I said, loved the whole thing. Honestly, it doesn't matter. I could literally watch any episode. Like, the first episode is probably the only one that I wouldn't rewatch a million times, but admittedly every other episode has lightsaber action. So it's kind of like, it's slightly biased. It's the only one that doesn't have a lightsaber actually ignite and have a fight happen. Every other episode, there's some sort of training or fighting in some way, shape, or form. It's kind of like, it's hard not to pick any of those over the very first. But she's super cute in that, and those little panda dog bear things, absolutely adorable. But we'd love to know your thoughts on all things Tales of the Jedi. If we get a season 2, what characters do you want them to focus on? I would love more stuff with Obi-Wan. It's Obi-Wan Kenobi, why not? Young Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, that would be pretty sick. I would love to see, matches with characters that typically don't interact, or things that we may not have even seen from Clone Wars. Or if we did see it from Clone Wars, here's just another thing with those characters teaming up. I think that'd be really cool. So I would love to see more of this. Hopefully we get a second season. I think we will. I haven't looked at reviews for obvious reasons, but as amazing as this is, there's no way we don't get another season where they're just like, hey, let's just do 6 episodes and just tell a couple of mini stories with just random characters. Anthologies for Star Wars always tend to go fairly well. I think I think that's been proven on several occasions, even if some of those occasions have failed movie wise. I think they always tend to go pretty well. I think all anthology Star Wars stuff is pretty nice. Just a succinct little story that's entertaining and connects to the overall universe, but it's its own thing and own characters in this specific moment. So I loved it. Like I said, we'd love to know what you guys thought about it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.